you gotta know in Chicago, with the shit going on, it's with the youth, bro. Everybody know the killing is with the youth. The youth is doing the killing. You know what I'm saying? It's our generation that's out here doing everything. Old niggas not out here killing each other. They barely, you know, they trying to get some money. And the old niggas that's on the streets, guess what they doing? Passing the guns down to their little homies. You feel me? So at the end of the day, if you think like me and got the mindset, if I'm in the streets, I'm doing this killing, I'm risking my life, my freedom every day. Can't nobody tell me shit about my life and what I'm doing. You not out here putting this work in with me front line. Now for the cowards who out here killing kids and shit like that, I don't speak for them. I can't speak for them. You know what I'm saying? I don't speak for those guys. But I'm saying this because the guys who act like all this, like, y'all not doing anything for these kids. You're not putting no money in their pocket. You're not creating no opportunities for them, you know? And I don't know if Larry Hoover and Chief Malik was doing that. I don't know. And a lot of people don't know. Like, nobody respecting no gangs. There's no chiefs. There's nobody above nobody. No man 30, 40 finna come on no block, especially not on my block, and tell me shit. You're not telling me nothing. I'm not listening to you. You wasn't out here with me. You wasn't with me when none of my homies got killed. Nothing. You wasn't with me when I was risking my life. Anything. You didn't put $1 in my pocket. You not feeding my mother. You not risking your life with me to feed my mother. You can't tell me shit. Period.
Get God on the phone, said it won't be long. I see jigger boots, I see styrofoam. Get God on the phone, said it won't be long. I see jigger boots, I see styrofoam. Get God on the phone, said it won't be long. I see jigger boots, I see styrofoams. My hood going crazy, where did we go wrong?
Once again, name's Raheem Flowers, and I wanted to really touch on something that was very pivotal and dear to my heart. And it's the city that I was raised in, Chicago, in the Midwest, the heart of America. And as you can see, there's a lot of pandemonium that was caused in 2016, more particularly in Chicago. For those who lived in Chicago and was born / and or raised in Chicago, you know that this is the year where there's been more deaths than has it ever been. Just like August 8th, where there's been, the death toll hasn't been that high since 2003. And if anybody can recall, in the beginning of this year, around winter in January, February, there hasn't been that much amount of shootings since the year 2000, since the very early 2000s. And the thing is, the real reason why these events are occurring, because they get encouraged. They get encouraged by the thoughts, by these whores. A lot of these black women in this neighborhood, in the South Side, the West Side, and even certain parts of the North Side. For those who watch channels like the War Chiraq via Akademiks, DJ Akademiks, or for those who watch Chicago news, you have a more ideal sense of what's going on. You have a more in-depth details of what goes on in the city. And also the statistics that I just displayed to you guys has been what it's been in Chicago. It's been totally disastrous. It's non-stop. And even though we have things like Paul O'Neill and that 16-year-old kid that died by a cop recently, but I have to think, what type of lifestyle did these kids have? And we all know that the cops are corrupt. But here's the thing. It's funny how Negroes like to get on white people for doing corrupt shit, when you Negroes rather, have been praising white people for the longest. Look at Al Capone. Al Capone pretty much made Chicago, or was one of the pioneers to that gangster lifestyle that a lot of cats have today. It was bred by guys like Al Capone. And Then you have rappers praising Frank White from Biggie, from Tupac praising Nicola Machiavelli, from praising John Gotti like Yo Gotti. And then you got all these rappers who like to brag, or all these black folks like to brag about their Gucci and Versace. I mean, you can't talk about cultural appropriation, about what white people do to black folks, they do to us, and then you go on and then you not only embrace their clothing, you get braggadocious, you gloat about it. I mean, when rappers like A$AP Ferg can say that meeting Ralph Lauren was like meeting Elijah Muhammad in the flesh, that should be enough of an indication that there is a high regard that blacks have for whites, or even envy. We don't want to say it, but that's what it's been. And going back to Chicago, when you look at your Jewish mayor like Rahm Emanuel, this fucker decided to close down dozens of schools in Chicago. So all these gang-banging, do-nothing thug-ass niggas that you see running around, they have nothing to do but run the block, but run the streets, because they don't have anywhere else to go during the afternoon time. So what are they gonna do? Stay posted up at a block at a corner near a liquor store. Even more now. Then, to add insult to injury, look at Tayshaun Lee. Look at those two brothers in Chicago that died during those Facebook Live shootings. One around April Fool's, and the other later, like around May, June-ish, I believe. They were killed. Black Lives Matter ass was nowhere to be found. But soon as one of these dudes that like to live, wanted to be about that life, got shot up and murked, that's when Black Lives Matter started getting their banners, coming together. And see, this is what makes us a walking paradox. We like to cry about the injustices that go on in the community, but at the same time, we have fabricated the injustices, along with this white daddy-ass government that black folks depend on, more specifically and especially black women. You can't talk about how black people and our sons and our black men are getting killed by these cops, but as soon as that guy doesn't pay child support, as soon as he says something or does something that you don't like and doesn't pander to your ego, what do? You make sure you call that same cop on him and lock his ass up. And black men, y'all not off the hook, because let me tell you why we and the rest are not off the hook. Because I've made a premise that the reason why black women have and just perpetuate the cycle of loving black men who are into criminology and being gangbangers, or in this day and age more of clique banging, is because of blaxploitation, especially the films. You have to understand, we are visual creatures. I mean, I even had a woman earlier this year in winter who stated that she was a former Black Panther. She said that they looked at black women in the community, looked at thugs as the protectors. This is a woman who was born, that's a baby boomer, that told me this. And you know, the baby boomers are like the grandparents, the great-grandparents of this generation that we live in right now. So if they looked at them as the thugs and protectors, then it only should become innate to, you know, Generation Y that these black women are like that, and so on, because blaxploitation films, they looked at them as something that was, what's the best word I can describe it as enticing, something that it was adventurous. And women always women always like to talk about how they want a guy that's adventurous and not boring and decisive and confident. Let me tell you something. These so-called men that you have an affinity for and get your pussy wet over, the best way to put it, and I don't even like to say this, these hyper-masculine, feminine tendency having dudes, are beta males who receive alpha male status, so to speak. And I would love for somebody to try to prove me wrong in that regard. We just have way too many incidents where Black Lives Matter will only come from a dude who is all tatted up, looking like one of these drill rappers in Chicago. You ain't never heard no Steve Urkel get murked and shot up in Black Lives Matter status, because that hasn't even occurred yet. Just like I said in the Hood Rat Dynamic video, you have never seen a cookie from Ned Declassified School Survival Guide. You never seen some black dude with a pocket protector or some average Joe who just works hard and lives his everyday life. You don't hear black men like that have to deal with this fuck shit. Even though, I won't lie, cops and white people, I'll say this: you get on black people for lacking accountability, which many do lack because they were raised by weak women. So let's just put that out there and call it what it is. But accountability is not a one-way street. The same thing goes for cops. I mean, I've been hearing that sheriff speak on the news lately, and he's just Captain Obvious to me. He will say things like, I think Sheriff Clark was his name, correct me if I'm wrong, and he was saying how recently single mothers were the sole purpose or one of the main sources to why there's so much chaotic events that just go on in the black community. Well, no shit, Sherlock. I mean, what are cops doing to make the situation any better? They're not calling out cops. The same way these black women and other black men don't call out the ratchetness and don't separate themselves unapologetically, cops don't, they do the same thing. They're akin to each other. Two peas of the same fucking pod. And I'm not gonna stand for it. So I don't care if y'all call me a coon, an Uncle Tom, a self-hater, a house Negro. All those lame ass stigmas that you try to pull with guys like Tommy Sotomayor, with guys like David Carroll, with guys like my brother Big B. Kell. Because let me tell you something. You gotta look at things from a higher perspective. Take the emotionalism out of it and see the world and see what is within your community and take it for what it is. And this goes beyond just black people. I mean, I'm looking at all these white trash that go around shitting on black people, but you don't realize that people, the higher ups, look at you working class black white people the same way that, or virtually the same way that they look at blacks. You're just a pawn. And you know, the rapper Joey Badass brought up a great point. I mean, it is pretty obvious they're trying to start a race war. And remember when that fuckboy Dylan Roof said he was trying to start a race war? Well, it looks like it's starting to manifest. I've seen so many comments on YouTube, so many comments on Facebook, where white people would get on the defense line against black people. And for those who are familiarized with it, you've heard the saying anti-racist equals anti-white, and there's some genocidal process that's occurring amongst the white community. I mean, I could even get deeper and speak about things that's going on in Europe, where white people feel threatened by these Muslims. In Sweden, the rape has increased, and in Britain, they feel threatened. I mean, it's all paradoxical. People need to understand that we're dealing with a psychological warfare. This just goes beyond white supremacy. This goes beyond Zionism. This goes beyond the Illuminati. People need to look at the grand scheme of things, because the world is bigger than you, and the world is bigger than your situation, and you have to look at all spectrums, and you have to find the key denominator. And personally, I think one of the main and the common denominator on why there's so much fuck shit going on is because of cultural Marxism. It gives us the illusion of equality and omitting societal accountability. It makes it seem like we're on an equal playing field because you're not supposed to offend somebody because of their gender. You're not supposed to offend somebody because of their skin color, because of their religion. You're supposed to use certain terms because certain terms are appropriate while the others are inappropriate. Because if you have an opinion that may be brash, that may be more brutally honest, that may be obscene to that community. So therefore, it should be regarded as a form of taboo. This is what they have alluded. And I would like for somebody to tell me that I'm lying and tell me that I'm wrong. And back to my city, Chiraq. I mean, and I say this with no disrespect. So I want to throw that out there. But Larry Hoover, David Barksdale, and Jet Fort or Chief Malik, Bobby Gore, creator of Vice Lord, like, here's one thing you guys gotta understand. You guys have created a bunch of stick-up kids, a bunch of domestic terrorists. All of these gangster disciples, black peace stones, Latin kings, four corner hustlers, Latin disciples, Satan disciples, whatever gang that you represent. I mean, things are just so out of order that motherfuckers don't care about who the OGs were. They don't care about no principles and structure. It's all about clickbanging, especially due to social media. You have people who just will threaten you online and they want to stunt on Facebook Live. They want to stunt on Instagram. Just like that jackass in the end of 2013 who killed his mother for her insurance policy or all that money that she had, tens of thousands of dollars. Like, you have to think about a mindset. These men don't think like men. They think like weak women. And I know I might have the misogynistic title on me for saying this, but we gotta call what it is because strong women understand and acknowledge there always needs to be a male role model. But unfortunately, these women, they rather just get wet, have a waterfall flooded, their pussy flooding like a waterfall over dudes who are poisoning the community, and then they procreate with these men and they have bastardized bastard children. And I found it hilarious on a page that I follow named Morale. Shout out to the Morale page and all my brothers and sisters on there. That there was a post that I saw and it said, alright, I can't laugh because this is dead serious. Women in Chicago, black women in Chicago are going to try to put an end to the violence. Why don't I tell the bees in the beehive to tell those same bees producing honey to put an end to honey? Why don't I tell somebody to use a mop, a bucket of shit and a mop, and I'm trying to stop flies and other disgusting organisms and bacteria from coming afloat? Why don't I tell somebody using a mop to use that same shitty, literally bucket made with feces and mop with that to prevent it, rather than using bleach, rather than I'm using clean water with soap? In this case, rather than having a man who is productive, rather than having a man with ambition and somebody who actually wants a family, not somebody who just wants to nut up in your pussy. But nobody thinks like that in this day and age. I hear these Hotep Negroes like Tariq Nasheed, or the pro-blacks rather like Tariq Nasheed, Dr. Umar Johnson, oh, simp-ass Boyce Watkins. When I hear these fools go and run their mouth and praise Acorn Gaines, where that broad encouraged her son to be abrasive and brash to the police officer who wasn't even being a total prick. And don't get me wrong, I'm from Chicago. I know how much of pricks these damn cops can be. But she was in the wrong, but they looked at this fucking bitch like a martyr. But let me tell you something. I'm not gonna look at no hood rat who wants to be a rebel with no cause as a fucking martyr. And that's what black people's problem that we have. Our priorities are ass backwards. We are just too much of feel-good individuals. That's why we love to hear white liberals. That's why we love to hear these Hotep Negroes. That's why they love to hear the black woman is God. As I said before, if the black woman is God, then she must be Asura, who is a Hindu god of destruction. They always fucking shit up. And I know it's not all black women, but it's too goddamn many. And for black women like Melanin Sutek, Priscilla Clark, and even Chrissy to an extent, I salute black women who do have that mindset, who do understand that there are things about the black woman that needs reformation. There are things about the black man that needs reformation. Instead of just always being pussy whipped, instead of always just simping. I've seen so many posts on Facebook, so many dudes in Chicago who get in fights over broads. And you know the funny thing is? These same women that's getting y'all killed are standing on the fucking sidelines. People don't gangbang in Chicago for money like that. They don't even gangbang for a high. Well, they do gangbang for a high, but the high is the punani, it's the pussy. And can I impute women for that? No. Because we as men need to have more self-control and just take our dick home with us. Masturbate if you have to. You may think I'm trying to be funny when I say this, but that saves lives. Whew. It really does. So now, we as black people, we need to separate ourselves from the nigga archetype doing that shit unapologetically. We need to black women need to call out the fuck shit that other black women cause, because no matter how educated you are, no matter how many degrees you have, no matter how much money you make and how financially well off you are, you will always identify because you still wear weave and you're making that billions of dollars. So Beyonce can't talk about no fucking Becky when she's wearing weave, and you want to make a video like Formation while emulating the Eurocentric hairstyle. It doesn't work like that. It just shows you that we as black people are walking paradoxes. Black men, you can't go around talking about, oh man, they taking our culture. It's cultural appropriation. And I believe it is to a degree. But then you wanna have songs like Versace. Then you wanna have Gucci bags, Louis bags, talk about how Ralph Lauren is akin to Elijah Muhammad, like A$AP Ferg said. See, I'm not gonna stand from it. Not from the end of white people, or black people, or Jews. Because Rahm Emanuel, as you all saw on the thumbnail, he was ignoring a bum. He couldn't even give that bum like $20. You are the fucking mayor of Chicago, so I know you got money. And we all know that Jewish people, they're well off in finances collectively. Yes, you have those poor Jewish people that work in bakeries. Yes, you have Jewish people who had to deal with the hardships of the Holocaust. Yes, you had Jewish people who had to deal with the persecution during the Middle Ages, but now, look at them. I mean, if Jewish people helped Hitler finance the Holocaust, what should that tell you? That should tell you that people are just driven by power. Survival of the fittest. That's all that's care about. Self-preservation. And I cannot fully fault any individual for having that train of thought. Because at the end of the day, we all just want to be happy. But we can't be happy when we have this sad mind state, this psychological warfare that's going on. We just can't, and we won't. So it's time to make a change. It's time to call out the fuck shit. Let's just destroy the political correctness and the cultural Marxism. And there's a fine line between being brutally honest and being deliberately insulting. And I think that's what a lot of fools like Donald Trump supporters fail to realize. And I'm not saying every Donald Trump supporter, I'm saying the majority that it seems to be every time I see it on the media. I mean, at this point, nobody can use the media. It's the media's fault. It's the media's fault as an excuse. When you post things on that fat fuck Q site via World Star Hip Hop, you're doing that on your own accord. When you want to post things for the Vines, do it for the Vines, you're doing that on your own accord. When you talk shit on Snapchat, you're doing that on your own accord. So I don't want to hear about no black folks talk about, oh man, you know, that's just the media, how they portray us. No, motherfucker. You press that, you hit the record button on the camera, you press that shit in the hood, you put that shit on Media Takeout, you put that shit on World Star Hip Hop, you put that shit on YouTube, you put that on the Vine so you can get on the Vine compilation. Ain't nobody trying to hear that sorry ass excuse you Negroes got. Please. This is why I'll call myself a renegade until people can recognize the errors of their ways. The baby boomers, you have created this fuck shit, and then you want to have all this condemnation for my generation and the ones that come after this. But guess what? You gotta clean up your junkyard, and now we gotta clean up the junkyard. Because you all refuse to admit to your own failures. That's what it trickles down to. So now, you have these young black men and these young black girls and women going through and dealing with this catharsis, this trauma, because you all didn't want to grow up. You didn't want to grow up out of that 70s era. You wanted to live like Hollywood Shuffle. You wanted to live like the people in Superfly. You all even wanted to live like even Django. I think about stuff. Going back to what I said. You see, when Django was killing all those white people and even black men that were getting killed and getting shot at, like Stephen Samuel's character, these black women were getting excited over that. You gotta look at the profound psychological mind state they had. And we as black people, we brought this upon ourselves. I could even compare and contrast the tribal warfares that Africa was having and even how these warfares that Chicago's having with their gangbanging. It's not any different. I mean, we brought this upon ourselves because of our own greed, just wanted some trinkets and some gold and some money. We sold ourselves out. I mean, even brothers like Dr. Claude Anderson will tell you this. And this is a man who would be considered illustrious to these pseudo-neo-pro-black Negroes. So if you're gonna call me a coon, call him a coon. Call men like the Honorable Marcus Garvey one, because he told you not to play a victim, and there's no fucking excuse because of the gift of nature that we're provided. We're provided the ability to utilize our knowledge, being able to have what is called free will. So when people talk about, well, you can't, but at the same time, I question free will, because people say you can't control how people think. Oh, yes, the fuck you can. How do you think Joseph Goebbels of the Nazis was able to have Germany become Nazi Germany along with Hitler and the Third Reich? How do you think Muslims are able to convince people to not like Jews on their Arabic channels? How do you think black women were able to convince Oprah, was able to convince all these medias, Maury, that black men ain't taking care of their kids and black men ain't shit? Well, who you decide to procreate with and what type of men, and same thing with black men and men in general, the type of women that you're into, that's simply that's a mere reflection of your own value system. So I'm not trying to hear it. So I cannot have respect for people in this era. Both my generation and our predecessors. Because we live in the age of information. This is where my generation lags. And we know the information is at the tip of our finger. We can read articles, we can go find books, we can just type it all in. We can even find it in Google. So we have no excuse. It's just time to clean up our act, clean up our mess. I'm not gonna respect no motherfucker who doesn't want to better this position. I'm not gonna respect people like Jesse Williams who gives these little half-assed, half-baked truths and not talk about the whole problem. Because when you leave vital details out, it never gets solved. And that's what it's gonna fucking be until we decide otherwise. So let me say this, Black Lives Matter. I said it once before and I'll say it once again. If Black lives truly mattered, if you were truly concerned about the well-being of us, our sons getting killed by these cops and being falsely accused, well, since you have aligned yourself with a Jew, a little midget Jew known as George Soros, who is financing your whole so-called cause, why don't you align yourself with the other Jewish people, like the Innocence Project? Something that seems a bit more legitimate with their cause than you guys. I mean, really, why don't you just go ahead and, if you really cared about these black men, why don't you give them job opportunities? Because let me tell you something, it's easier for a black woman to get a job than a black man. This is a fact. And honestly, the way I see it, we are living in significantly worse times because of looking for approval from whitey. You see, black people are always better off when we just did us. When you had the Negro Leagues going on. I doubt Jackie Robinson was the best black player during that era. When you had the Harlem Renaissance, when you had Black Wall Street, granted I know it was burnt down, but even then, black people were prosperous collectively, but as soon as we looked for social integration rather than economic or even both, because eventually, if we can economize with another group, logically, you would be able to socialize. You would have to by proxy. But no, Martin Luther King, he knew he fucked up. That's why he said, I have entered my people in a burning house. And that is what you did, Dr. King. The Honorable Marcus Garvey understood this, that it should be power that we look for, not approval. And you don't even have to think about approval, because once you are able to have that power, you get that approval. Frederick Douglass had an interesting quote. He said, "It is constituted in human nature to not respect those who have no power. You can only pity them, and the world pities blacks. That's just the truth of the matter. They pity us." And could you impute them for that? No. We all know this, and I have this belief. 65% of the fuck shit that goes on in the black community is because of black women. I stand by that. 20% is because of black men. And 15% is other. So, I'm gonna leave you off with this. A pro-black said this also. Minister Louis Farrakhan said that the community is based on the status of the community, basically, was he was saying. It was based on the character of your women. And look at black women. I mean, you can't be strong and independent and depend on this white daddy ass government. You can't say that you're strong and you can't handle any sort of criticism, whether it be constructive or whether it just be something demeaning. You can't say that you're a god or a goddess, and then as soon as somebody calls you out on your own personal blunders, what do? You go on and talk about nobody's perfect, but by default, by proxy, you are perfect if you're a god. Because gods or goddesses are absolute, meaning they're perfect. So when people are able to get their act right, when people can acknowledge the errors of their ways, and when we can work together, old and young generation, black men, black women, black men, white men, all that shit, mixed breeds, whatever, Latinos, Asians, when people can come together and understand that there is a difference, you have to acknowledge each other's differences, because that's the only true way that you may not find equality, but you will find mutual respect, which comes close to what we call equality. So that's how I'm gonna leave it off, guys. I'm out.